Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming. I got 15 minutes to put together some kind of summary or introduction to a work that took me 7 years to write and the rest of my life to understand, which I'm still in the process of doing. It's a process that involves contemplation, the gene keys. So it takes time to enter into the real understanding and deep embodiment of the wisdom that's written in this book. How did it come about? In a very short few paragraphs, I was doing a deep contemplation before a course that I was giving in Newcastle up in England, northern England, and it was about the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and I was doing this course, and I called it the 64 gifts because I wanted to understand in real depth and practical depth what those hexagrams really meant. And so I was, in preparation for that, I'd spent about 6 months coming up with 64 words for those gifts, and just simple words, and to express the essence that I considered the modern essence of what that archetype meant and how you could use it. And I was sitting on the train and travelling north with a very good friend of mine, psychotherapist from Austria, and we were talking about the course, and he said, you know, I think there are some negative shadow sides to this and to these, and I said, you know, I think you're right, because if there's a gift, there has to be a shadow to that gift. And so we spent the rest of the journey, 3 hours, running through the words that we came up with for these 64 shadows. And so I arrived in Newcastle with a new course, and that night I went to bed and I was thinking about it, and a part of me was not comfortable, is not comfortable with dualities, because I always feel there's a third element, a transcendent element. So I was juggling this shadow, this gift, and then I had this sense that there was a third element, a siddhi. I called it a siddhi, an essence, a divine essence, if you like. And that night I got these 64 words. I had a big, one of those mystical experiences we occasionally have. I didn't sleep that night, and these 64 states were sort of revealed inside me, and these words just came very, very easily and quickly, and they formed this spectrum, which is the basis of the Gene Keys book, Spectrum of Consciousness, I called it. And so essentially what you have here in the Gene Keys book is a spectrum of 64 potential human states with 3 dimensions to them. So you have the gifts, which are in the middle, you know, the gifts such as, if I pick one at random, the 46th gift, the gift of delight, right now. That word has a whole universe contained inside it. What does it mean? How does that express? You know, what does that mean for me? And then if you look at if you would take that as an example and you say, well, you know, what's the shadow of that? It would be, you know, frigidity. That would be one of them. And it's like coming here to London today. You know, I came up from Devon. I live in Devon in the country. I'm really a poet, and so I wander the moors and contemplate deep things. And but I came up here, and you see these people frantically running, and this one woman particularly caught my eye, very stressed and nervous and in a hurry. And it kind of dawned on me that, you know, people who are very captured in those low frequency states, as I call them, shadow states, like the stress of that, hidden inside that is actually something really powerful and transcendent. So I had a hunch, you know, when I was thinking about that woman as she'd rushed past me, I thought, I bet you she has the gift of stillness, you know, the siddhi of stillness, the opposite end of that spectrum, of that energy. So what this does is it opens up a whole universe for looking at challenges in life. You look at the shadow states of, you know, and you can pick any shadow state, and, you know, can you think of anyone right now in your life who is overloaded, you know, who just feels overwhelmed and overloaded. Think of that person. And then actually at the other end of the spectrum of that is harmony. Someone who has the potential to live the archetype of harmony at all levels of being. And that may be a very musical person as well. That may be a person very in tune with kind of celestial, environmental rhythms. And that's their highest potential. So the book and the whole Gene Keys teaching gives you this journey of transformation to look deep into these difficult states, both in yourself, but also in the people around you, in your friends, your family, you know, especially the people who are most challenging in your life. You know, the people who really manifest the shadow states professionally. You know, those are the people who need the most compassion. So if you can identify, you know, what that state is, you can see the other end of the spectrum, and you can hold that for them. It's wonderful for children, you know, for young children. You can hold those states in your inner being, however they're behaving. And you can do that with anyone. And that's really the essence of the Gene Keys teachings. The other side of it is I was involved with something for a while called the Human Design System, which attaches astrology to the I Ching, to these 64 hexagrams. And that was an interesting revelation for me, because the whole book came together around a profile, an online profile that you could print out and run for yourself, and it would give you, what it does is it gives you, I'll give you an example, got one here, well, a bit of one. It gives you a pathway and a sequence through these gene keys. So it gives you personalized gene keys. I can't obviously go into how that works and, you know, where that all came from, but it gives you a series of journeys that become personalized. So when you have the book and you go deeply into the book, you'll see, you know, this one, this is my son actually, he has at his life's work, each one of these positions, it represents a part of our life. So his life's work is provocation, right? So I know that one very well because I live with him and I know how provocative he can be. And at the other side, his life's work is about dynamism. So there's a person who's all that provocative energy, if it's not channeled in a healthy, creative, active life, you've got someone who's really running up and down the walls. And at the highest level, it's liberation. All that energy is actually seeking freedom. That's where it's going. It's seeking freedom, freedom from the attachments of the world, the freedom of the higher consciousness. That's its ultimate kind of goal. So when you look at these profiles, it's a way of working with the gene keys very personally. And you can get them online. They're free, and it's very interesting. It's a whole journey through the gene keys. So you can use the book in many different ways. You can use it, as I first described it, just looking at the spectrum and identifying states that you see around you, and then using the lens of compassion to see, well, what is really hidden in that behavior? Not just in the other, but in yourself. You know, what are your tendencies? What are your shadow tendencies? And this whole teaching goes very deeply into the shadow, into what Carl Jung called the shadow, the realms of our challenges, our inner negative patterns that we've brought with us into the world, that we're imprinted with, you know. And that's why this is really called Gene Keys, because it's about imprinting and it's about editing our imprinting. Interestingly, tonight on the news there was a whole thing about gene editing, because in the UK they've passed a law now that allows certain biological laboratories to edit the genes of embryos, which is interesting, really, and controversial perhaps, but it's where our medicine is heading. And the gene keys are a little bit like that, because they take this universal code and they allow you to edit it inside yourself, inside your life, through the way you live, through your attitude, through your self-compassion, your self-acceptance, particularly your ability to forgive yourself and to work with these shadows and to transform them inside yourself. And they get transformed into very creative energies. You see, a shadow pattern, a difficult pattern, has a huge amount of latent creative juice inside it. It's waiting to be unlocked. So in the Gene Keys, you'll see one of the repeating terms is every shadow contains a gift. It's a bit of a cliche, actually, but there's depth in these cliches. You know, every shadow contains a gift. So it requires awareness. It requires mindfulness. It requires that we go inside on a contemplative journey. We unlock the source that's really hiding inside that difficult state. And when we find it, then we experience a shift. And the shift isn't just, you know, psychological. At a deep level, it becomes, you know, genetic. It's wired. You know, we rewire ourselves. We edit the way we are expressing our genetic inheritance, our legacy that we've brought with us. So that's really the essence of the Gene Keys. And you know, when you take these, if you want to go deeper into the knowledge and into the wisdom, I'd recommend beginning with the book, because the book is, many people just have the book, and that's enough. It's enough for them just as a, you know, it's a, excuse me, it's a hefty tome. It's got a lot of wisdom. It took a long time to compile all that. It was a download, if you like, and it brings together, synthesizes many streams of the perennial wisdom. And so that's one way you can work with it. And then very recommended that you get hold of a profile and start playing with these terms and look at your Gene Keys and see what they respond to in the book. And the third component, because it's a long journey, it's not a quick fix system. It takes time to really understand these. You know, you can read about them. That's the first level of contemplation, mentally understanding them. But then for them to actually filter deeper into your everyday life, it has to reach into the emotional realm. You have to start seeing it in your relationships. You have to start understanding your reaction patterns and your unconscious fears. And that's what it leads you to. It leads you to very specific patterns, and it mirrors them for you. But your life is the palette, right, where it all comes alive. And this is just a pointer, a series of pointers. So what I did is I've laid it out in a program called the Golden Path program, which breaks it down step by step, because otherwise it can seem a little overwhelming at first. It isn't, but it can seem like anything that has depth and will take you, you know, some time to really get into. It takes some commitment on your part to get in. This is not a book you read. Well, not many people I know have read it A to Z, you know, 1 to 64. It's more of a book that you probe into and that you play with and that you use as a reference, or you can open at random in the spirit of the original I Ching, you know, by the way. So the Golden Path program takes you on these step by step. It's an online program, so it applies the Gene Keys to your life. So it's these three components. I call them the map is the map, the compass, that's your profile, and the journey itself is the Golden Path. It's a path through these Gene Keys that takes you deeper and deeper into the programming of your imprinting. And it takes you back in time, literally to the point of conception. So what you're doing is you're literally unwinding these deep patterns that are wound into the helix of our DNA. And it's a softening and an opening, and it requires deep patience, compassion, forgiveness, all the siddhis, all the higher states that are listed in here. And I'll finish on that note, because that's really the pearl that I received when I wrote this, and as I contemplate it, is that there's actually only one of these states at the highest level. That we give them different names and different words, whether it's compassion or forgiveness I've mentioned, or any of them, whether it's ecstasy or whatever the manifestation of the highest frequency of our potential is. It's actually just one field of higher consciousness, and your particular one is just the language that it's expressed through your DNA. So it's highly specific to you. So in that respect, it's kind of like a dictionary of the enlightened state, if you want to look at it like that. And you can look at people, you know, if you want to, people like doing that, look at profiles of enlightened beings, and you can see these states, and you can read about them, and how different they are. It's why you'll have different teachers saying opposite things, you know, and you try and understand that. Why does this one say this, and the other one says, no, don't do that? You know, and you can see it in here. It's just imprinting. You know, no matter how wide your state is, you're still limited by the language of your culture and the language of your specific genetic imprinting and your design, your destiny, your karma, all of that. So I hope you have some fun and have a look into this and enjoy some deep contemplation. And also you can, if you're very interested and you get involved, you become part of a whole movement globally. This is gathering momentum, and a lot of very fascinating, interested people are working with it in many different fields and applying it not only to their own lives but to their clients, to their workplace, to relationships. It is a perennial piece of writing. It's a perennial wisdom, so it applies to anything you can possibly imagine. Thank you. About whether someone has a personalized imprint of the gene keys and or levels and layers that unravel in sequences, which is exactly the case. As I understand it, and as it has been revealed in my life and through being in the flow of this teaching, this wisdom, everything unwinds in evolutionary terms according to sequences. So from the moment we were born, there's a sequence that starts to unravel. You might call that karma. The ancients call that karma. Our karma begins to unravel. But actually there's something in our DNA that starts to just fire off certain patterns at certain points in our life. And so traveling the golden path as a contemplative journey is something that you do in reverse. So you start with now, and then you work backwards. So you start with the most applicable, your life's work that I mentioned, you know, that this is what I'm here to do, okay, and you start there, and then you work deeper and deeper and deeper through the layers and the gene keys that apply to your specific coding, and it keeps unraveling like an onion as you go deeper, and it opens up those inner states, you know, increasingly as you move deeper in the transformational process, until hopefully one day you get to the core, to the source, where there's just light. Yeah. And so you have a gene key that relates to your core. You know. So the question is the book enough to take you deep? I would say if you have a gift already for the contemplative practice, the book could take you very deeply over a period of time. Contemplation doesn't come naturally to the Western mindset, and many of us have learned or tried to learn meditation, and contemplation is slightly different. It's a looser hold than meditation, which is more formal. You close your eyes, you focus in. Contemplation is it's a state of, it's an art actually. It's an art. It's not something you can learn as a technique very easily. It's a knack. So if you have a knack for inquiry, self-inquiry, but that isn't only mental, that doesn't get stuck in the mental realm, but that keeps taking you deeper until it becomes embodied, then yes, the book is enough. Any book that speaks the truth is enough. I'm not a scientist, okay? So, as I said, I'm a poet, so when you read the Gene Keys, you're reading a poet's view of DNA. And you're reading there are right brain, left brain synthesis kind of merged into these teachings. So my goal is not to prove it, it's to invite people to take the journey so that you experience that for yourself. If you've ever had what, let's call it an altered state, of consciousness, if you've experienced a heightened state of consciousness at any point in your life, you feel it right within the core of your DNA. It's as if you've been lit on fire, or it's as if you've fallen completely silent. Whatever your manifestation is, whichever of the siddhis have just unlocked inside you spontaneously, it's something that seems to go right to the core of our being. So how could it not take place in the DNA? Practical one, with the book and with your profile, confusion is common and normal at the beginning because you have all this information or this wisdom, and it's difficult to know quite how to begin and find a rhythm with it. And I understand that very well. And I spent 2 years with that question, and that's where I came out with this unraveling program where I laid it out in steps, and the Golden Path program. And it enables you to take the book and the profile and simply break it down into chunks, so contemplative chunks. So you start, the first step, you'll find it on my website, step 1, it's free, and you have all this information, and it gives you an idea of, this is the structure. So the steps tell you very simply, if you want, this is the other end of the spectrum from just doing it on your own. It's holding your hand a little bit and saying, look, read this, do this, listen to that audio, watch this webinar, and contemplate this. And you can do those chunks. That's one step, right? And that's manageable for most people. You don't need to worry about what lies ahead. You start with one gene key, one place, and you just concentrate on that until you feel you've got it. And then you might go to step 2, and you might start entering deeper into the program. And there are 33 steps, and they take you through purpose, partnership, and prosperity, which are in a sequence which unfold naturally. So it's always funny to me that prosperity comes only when real prosperity, when you've sorted your relationships first. Then prosperity can dawn, because it's the collective blossoming. So you have to have clear relationship patterns. And begins with purpose, which is the anchoring at the very beginning. So I would recommend going online and trying the first step and looking into that information, and see that it's very nicely laid out, actually. I spent a lot of time just making it very logical and simple, as though I was following it myself, which I was. And then I go, okay, well, what shall I put in step 2? And in step 2, for example, there is a gene key to contemplate, which is just for anyone, which is the 29th gene key, and it's about commitment. And the shadow is half-heartedness. And so it gives you a clue. It says, give yourself to this 100%, and it will start to mirror back truth to you. You have to stay with it, and then it begins to unravel, and the insights begin to unravel. And I always say that to people, that it might take a little while for the first insight to drop, but once you've had an insight is a mental moment of a bolt of, I'm beginning to understand. And then the insights go deeper. And as they go deeper and they enter into the emotional field, they become breakthroughs. And that's very powerful. People who've been working with the gene keys for a long time will describe their breakthroughs, for example, in their relationships. And they'll just go, I finally saw myself in the pattern. I saw how deeply embedded it was. And I couldn't do anything about it, but I saw it. And the next step is to actually, take it apart and catch yourself in the pattern, and finally before the pattern manifests. And then the third layer, you have insight, that's the mental, you have breakthrough, that's the emotional, and you have epiphany. And epiphany is the physical transmutation, and that is something beyond words, because it's something when your body gets it. Your body just goes, I get it. But it's not a experience that you can explain or understand. That's where the DNA has opened and manifested its higher state. And then you're back to the beginning again. You go, right, okay, I've got to work on the next one. And they go on getting deeper and deeper. It's not like they ever leave you until you attain that final crystallized goal, which we call realization. And even then, I don't believe it stops. transformed into gifts. That's our goal, to transform the shadow patterns into gifts. That's quite a goal in itself.
Gifts and then city.
And then the gifts, as they flower, they become the city. So the shadow is like the seed, and then the gift is like the flower, and then the city is the fruit, and the fruit contains the seed. You know? So they're all inside each other. Inside the shadow is the city. Inside the lowest state is the highest state. That's what I begun by saying. You know, the most stressful woman I saw today is probably the most peaceful woman in London. You know, potentially the stillest. The question is about the goal of moving into the shadow in more depth. And there are 3 stages to that. Everything I do is about 3s. I'm sorry, I apologise, but it just has to be. The beginning is allowing. So the first thing you can do is you see the state and you allow the state. So let's say you're angry or you're reacting to something someone said, and you know you're reacting, and you hate the fact you're reacting, and you hate the fact you're arguing with them, and you know it's not going to go well, because it never goes well. But you just allow it. So there's a little bit of awareness around it. Or it might be sadness, it might be depression, it might be a really deep state, something that you can't seem to do anything with. So the first stage is allowing it. You just have to allow it. So you can allow it and hate it. You know, you can allow it and hate yourself for allowing it. But it's the first stage of awareness, of self-awareness. And as that allowing moves deeper, it becomes acceptance. One day it becomes acceptance. And that's when it's not like there's a specific moment you can go, I'm now in acceptance. But after a while you begin to feel a kind of vague comfort at some level that's okay. You know, you feel that it's okay. You know, numbness is a good one, right? A lot of the time people say, well, I don't feel anything, I just feel numb. You know, so you start by surrounding that with, okay, it's okay to feel numb. It's okay. And then as that numbness becomes more familiar to you at every level, then you begin to accept it. And then it opens up a little, it softens, you soften yourself around it. And the final phase is embrace. So you get allow, accept, embrace. And embrace is again when it reaches right into the physical, you know, DNA, right into the bones of who you are. And when you embrace it, you let it go. You surrender absolutely to it. You surrender that it's out of your control. You can't, you know, but out of that surrender may come a great impulse to do something. So if it's depression, out of that embrace may come a real dynamic, I'm going to do something. I'm going to change. You know, but that comes naturally rather than being forced. It's something that emerges out of the embrace. So those are the stages of working with the shadows. It's really an important question. The question is about inherited genetic disorders, or indeed any diseases, and whether the gene keys is relevant or whether it can help people change or help. Yeah. It's obviously a very deep question, and it has far-reaching implications. You know, does our consciousness, is it able to transmute a deeply held disease or disorder, you know, at a genetic level that we might have been born with? It could be a defect, or it could be a tendency towards depression, as I said, something really deep-seated. It's a deeper question, and you can't say for sure what the answer is. All I can say is that people have worked with the gene keys and are working with them, you know, and have died with them, and have gone on journeys through health transformations with them. Some have probably used it in that way, and it may have helped, and it may not have helped, or it may have helped at some emotional level. It may have helped them let go of what they needed to let go of. Everyone has their specific journey, so I couldn't make any claims about it, but I would say that consciousness has the ability to penetrate right to the heart of any illness and disease, and there is the potential for that siddhi state to change it at any moment. You know, one of the gene keys is boundlessness. You know, the possibility that anything is possible. You know, that anything is possible. Sudden, immediate transformation is possible. We've heard of them. They exist. Sudden healings. And the opening up into that possibility, you know, is it's a journey in itself. So if you have one of those illnesses, that can be the gene keys can be a really powerful way of allow, accept, embrace, and I wonder what the mystery is that will occur to you as you go through that process. But it's the journey to liberation, whether it kills you or whether you suddenly heal that and then go on in life to do other things. Yeah. Come into it. Well, it's an interesting one. If you look at it from the view of the shadow, you feel like you don't have any free will. You're stuck with this pattern and you don't know how to get out of it. And you don't, perhaps part of you doesn't even want to get out of it because you feel so trapped. You become a victim of the state. And after a while working with the allow, accept, embrace, whether you're using the gene keys or any other spiritual teaching, they all head in the same direction. Can you accept this? How deeply can you accept this? What does accepting it mean? What happens at the gift level, the next level up, is that you become self-empowered. You move beyond the victim state. So at that level, suddenly you feel free. Suddenly you feel, I can do something. I have free will. So from the gift level, everything is available. Free will is where it lives. You're no longer a victim. But the final stage is the siddhi. And it's interesting because the siddhi comes right back round. It comes to, oh, maybe I don't have free will. Because once you're in the highest state of consciousness, there's no I to have free will. So it's not even a question. You know, so you've gone beyond the concept of free will and not free will. You've moved into the, you know, only God or only the Tao, or only the one, whatever you call it, has the free will. But it's not me, because I'm not here. So will is not in the language of the siddhi state. But it's interesting how I always found it interesting how it comes back, in a way, to the core. So yeah, free will. Does free will conflict with destiny? You're asking a deep question there. If I apply it to these teachings, then the two move together. You know, because destiny is the idea, perhaps, you could interpret it in different ways. It's the idea that there's something written. And so the understanding is, in the beginning, I'm stuck here. And then the gift level, the next level up in awakening, if you could call it that, is I can do something. I'm in charge of my destiny. I can change it, which is a very empowering state. It's actually the foundation of the whole New Age movement. I can change it. But then the highest state is kind of beyond the New Age movement, because the surrender is there's nothing to change. What's the point in trying to change anything? I'm one. I'm everything. The thing is, you can't kind of fake that. You have to get there naturally. So you can't go, oh well, I'm not going to do anything then, because that would be a confusion of the understanding. So there's a natural flowering of that deeper wisdom. I think that yes, there's predestination and there isn't, and it's all depending on your consciousness. But neither are true as well. I do lots, because I teach lots of different courses, and I use many different practices. The art of contemplation is a practice, but it's a practice that's an umbrella. So it holds under its kind of umbrage, it holds many different techniques. So on one side, prayer, the Western technique really. Well, that's not totally true, is it? The Islamic world also uses prayer, and so does the Buddhist in certain ways. So you have prayer on one side, and then you have meditation. So prayer is a reaching and a pushing in a way, a calling, an invoking, and then meditation is a waiting. It's passive. It's an allowing. And under the umbrella of contemplation, all these techniques are allowed. But the central aspect of the gene keys is that you use the gene keys as contemplative journeys, each one. So you train your thought on it, you train your emotions on it, and you train you begin to focus your body into it. And whatever techniques you use already are part of that journey. So I don't layer in too many because I know they're out there, and I know that we all have our yogas and I'm a runner, right? I love to run, and running is the way my body contemplates. I don't know how it works, but when I run, if I begin a run with a question, I end the run with an answer. But the answer's not kind of all intellectual, it's somewhere taken place in the body. So any embodiment practice, whatever you use, contemplation makes use of any technique. It's very generous like that. So when you really begin to understand, it's going to be one of my next books, actually, a book on contemplation. Because I'd like people to understand the generosity and the width of that term, and how many of us are using it already without realizing. We are living contemplative lives. We are looking for the answers. So many techniques, Kundalini and DNA. I'm sure that there is. How could there not be? The DNA is a serpent in itself. It's wound around the central column of every single fiber of our body. And so for some people, again, if you look into the gene keys that relate to your journey, your spiritual journey, there are certain gene keys that have more of the flavor of those fiery awakenings. The 51st gene key is one of those, and there are others. The Chinese call that one thunder, the awakening, the sudden explosive awakenings. And there are other quieter, still awakenings. There are gradual awakenings. There are all manner of awakenings, of styles of awakening. So when you look into the gene keys, you're looking specifically at the mirror of what's happened for you, and therefore it allows you to kind of tailor your journey so you don't waste time seeking something that doesn't quite fit with your imprinting. So you might spend years looking for those experiences, and then you look at the gene keys, well, I have the city of stillness. So why don't I go and sit on a mountain somewhere and see what that feels like, or gaze into a lake, or go to a teacher who embodies stillness, rather than one of those ones that's going, right, on your legs, up, fire, breathe. I'm not saying that Kundalini is like that, but there are certain forms of awakening that are very dynamic, and there are other teachers and teachings that are the opposite, passive. So we have to thread our way. And the Gene Keys is a wonderful encyclopedia to show you, well, what's your way? What does it feel like? And your relationships, the book doesn't tell you in as many words, but it gives poetic descriptions and flavors so that you can begin to intuit for yourself what yours feels like, because it's always felt like that inside you. And you've known it since you were a child. That's my way. That's my way. Yeah, and when you find your way, it feels like you've really turned a corner, because you stop being distracted by all those other extraneous loopholes in the journey, in the spiritual journey, and you go straight to the magic core, the bullet that's yours, the bullseye. Like an I Ching, of course. You can use it. You can use the book as an I Ching. You can use it in so many ways. You can actually, there's a gene key for every day. You know, so there's a gene key transiting, you know, because it's this, you can look at it as an astrology system. You can see that there's a gene key that changes, actually for every week there's a gene key moves around, the sun moves around this wheel, and it moves through a gene key about one every 6 days. But it's also moving through the lines. Each gene key is made up of 6 lines. I haven't got time to explain those, but they're like variations and colours in that gene key. They're the tones of that gene key, and how the themes change. So you might have one particular gene key alive in the heavens right now as a theme, and you see it appearing in your life, and perhaps in the headlines, and perhaps in all kinds of places. And you know, this is the annual cycle. But then there are other ones, you know, that are changing in nuances all the time. So there's a way of playing with it very deeply.
And is that based on Chinese astrology?
No, it's actually, I've tied it into the Western astrology system. But you could, you know, there's as many ways of playing with it. There are many people. There are lots of Chinese people working with the gene keys. Unsurprisingly, in a way, there are many people in Hong Kong, and there's a book being translated into Chinese, and you know, that's where it came from. So it's wonderful that it's returning to its source in that sense. Yeah. So it's a question about how DNA and imprinting relates to astrology, really. I have a very wise friend who's an older man, and we have these wonderful conversations, and he just doesn't buy it, you know, and we agree to not understand each other. And this, as I attempt to describe to him the holographic universe, where everything is connected to everything else, and every moment in time relates to a specific moment of imprinting, which is what astrology has intuited for millennia. So when you look in the heavens, you're really looking at these patterns unraveling, these same patterns, but by using the 64 around the wheel of the year, or the zodiac, you're looking into the same holographic code as DNA, which is made up of 64 times 6 patterns, the amino acid structure. So you're actually looking at this same pattern. You know, a scientist is going to laugh at that idea, but that doesn't mean it's not right. You know, it just means that we haven't yet understood the holographic patterning of the universe, where everything is connected to everything else. Anyone who has had an altered state will know exactly what I'm talking about. You can have an altered state where you understand, you see through the veil, and you realize the joke that every moment of now is connected to a pattern somewhere, and those patterns are endless fractal patterns, cosmic fractal patterns that are just inside each other, hidden, endlessly repeated, but in different nuances. And time is also the same. Time is another way of measuring. So when you look at time, I mean, physics is getting closer, you know, with the black holes, you know, where time dissolves and collapses, and then we don't know what happens, you know, through a black hole. But that's what awakening is. You pass through the black hole and time dissolves. I mean, it's a wonderful metaphor, you know, as above, so below. And that's the journey back to the source, back into the nexus, the egg, you know, where we began, the navel, the dantian, you know, the belly. I teach a lot about the belly in my work. The question is about the soul, and it's
the DNA, is it one and the same?
how the soul connects to DNA. Perhaps you could, it depends what you mean by the word soul. There are many different ways, whether you're using the word soul or spirit, or you might say that the soul or the spirit uses the DNA and makes use of it like software, and can mutate it potentially, so you might say that the soul or the spirit squeezes itself into the package of DNA, a body, which is what it is, a package of DNA, and then but it's form, right? It's very dense form, but then the soul has to, or the spirit has to, find its way through that and evolve to see itself, to explore, to find itself again, to awaken. So you might say, I say you might say because it's just a way of looking. And it depends on your understanding of the word soul. Some people think that that is a separate entity that moves from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, which is one way of looking at it. But you might also say that that's another kind of mental way of viewing a continuity. Some people would say that the Buddhists would say that the soul doesn't survive death, but the continuity of the pattern survives death. But there's no separate part of you that goes on. But so the DNA is just a vehicle, a classroom, for that little aspect of consciousness to awaken beyond the form. Ultimately, written into the heart of the gene keys, I haven't really mentioned this, is a prophetic change that's coming to humanity. It's in the 55th gene key, and you can read that one. It's on my website, free, under the book. When you click in the book, you can read that particular one. It's a very important one, and it shows you the what's coming, what's changing inside us. That the consciousness itself is attempting, you could say, to transcend the DNA. So it's getting ready to transcend DNA. It's actually programmed to transcend DNA, which is what the siddhis are. The siddhi is where you transcend the DNA. And then our evolution as we see it is finished. As a human, anyway, as a human. Then another evolution opens up, something beyond words and ideas. Something where only a poet can dream, unless you go there and disappear into that. So yeah, it's a game, the DNA part.